Well, hello everybody. It's Paul Rose here in Switzerland, and to get us started, there's a man that exists between on this long silver thread that connects global field work. So when we're in the field, every single data point, every field observation, every research paper that's published helps to drive global economies and smart political decision making. Well, in the middle of that uncelebrated but beautiful silver thread are a few very key people. And one of them is Maxwell Hall from the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to bring him in right away. So, Max, let me bring you in. Hello, Max.
Paul. Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And
Joe, thank you for.
It's great to have you here, Max. And Max, just so everyone knows, a former BBC journalist, uses multimedia storytelling to engage global audiences and encourage world leaders to focus on tackling some of the biggest challenges that we face as a society. He's created sessions in Davos, broadcast to millions around the world. He put together the session called Space Connect, which connected everybody to the International Space Station. And he works closely with climate and biodiversity experts at the Forum Center for Nature and Climate. So welcome, Max. And it's no exaggeration to say you are the man in the middle of that silver thread. When me and all of our colleagues joining us in field science, we get out of that tent every 3 hours to take those observations or make dive number 4 in cold conditions, and it's the end of the day and we're making those samples, we know that somehow every single data point is helping to drive global economies and smart decision making. And that's what you do, isn't that right, Max?
Yeah, that's what a lovely introduction, Paul. That's you're right about this connection. There is a connection between what scientists are doing out in the field and what can happen in corporate boardrooms, what can happen in government policy strategy meetings. It's often very difficult to see that thread, but I think connecting the two with smart storytelling can actually bring some of the findings from biodiversity research and the latest things that are being seen into the boardroom. And that's very much what the sort of into the boardroom, but also into sort of government strategy rooms. And that's essentially what we try to do at the World Economic Forum. And what I try to do on that, I'm not a biodiversity expert and I'm not a finance expert, but what I try to do, and the bridge I try to make is storytelling. And I try to do it using the most interesting data points and the most interesting stories that you can tell around those data points.
It's great, Max, because I always say that, in a perfect world, chief executives and board members and politicians and everybody should be in the field at some point in their lives and be there and feel it and touch it and be at the front line. But somehow we can hope through your work that they feel that. So when they're in a boardroom wearing the best suits, they feel the energy and enthusiasm and power and vitality of the field work. So how do you actually do that, Max? How do you get them to really feel it?
I think the thing that you've always got to remember is you're dealing with really busy people, and these are really busy. These are people who are having to make big decisions, whether it's about their businesses, their staff, their supply chain, the people who are investing in their organizations, or if you're a government, it is an absolute non-stop, relentless task. Whether you will be sort of going from a press announcement on some big initiative to sort of policy meeting on X, Y, or Z, to meeting constituents on something or other. These are people who have they've got a huge amount on their plates, and so you have to remember that when you're dealing with busy people, that you need to be able to sort of capture them with sort of one or two things. And I think most of people, when they're looking at including the sort of top CEOs, top government leaders, or the sort of person who's advising these people, they have such limited time to absorb information. So whenever they read or listen or pick up a report or something like that, they're always scanning for content, and they never read the full thing word for word. So you can have a big research paper that goes into huge amounts of data and depth, and I would sort of still encourage people to do that. But it's really important that there is something in there that captures their attention, because essentially what they're doing, they're scanning through all of this content, and they're trying to answer their brain is in the background trying to answer two questions, or two or three questions. What's new and interesting, and how does it impact me, or how does it impact the area I'm responsible for?
That's great. In a way, you're sort of international translator somehow, taking in all these different field languages,
Yes,
if you like, and then trying to distill it into actions and smart decision making. I mean, I can imagine what it's like. So then, for the opposite side of that, how would you suggest field projects communicate their work? Because they communicate it by science projects, they communicate science papers, they communicate it by new findings and new understandings. And of course, they've got to produce a complete, fully comprehensive, peer-reviewed science report. But how else do you suggest that field projects communicate their work to decision makers?
Well, there's a nice acronym around this. I'm not going to present any slides or anything, but I think if you just remember this acronym, it's quite useful. You need to make people care. So you need to make people care. And if you take the words care, C-A-R-E, the first thing you need on there, the C, is you need to be clear. You need to have clarity in what you're saying to people. Then A, it needs to be accessible. So you can't assume that your audience has any pre-existing knowledge. Even people, policymakers who are, very smart people who have a position of responsibility are often not experts on that thing that they have responsibility. So you need to find a way to make things relevant to their experience, their everyday lives. Then the R is relevant. Make sure things are relevant to people's lives. There's a really nice example of a headline in Bloomberg recently, and it was all around deforestation and human rights abuses in cocoa supply chains. So quite a sort of complicated story. But the headline was, I've got it just here. The environmental disaster lurking inside your chocolate bar. Very good sort of way of just grabbing attention. Yeah, we've all, you've got the accessibility, you've got the clarity there. It's short, it's pithy, it's succinct. You've got it's accessible. It doesn't sort of use any jargon or sort of pre-existing knowledge. It's relevant to people's lives. We've all had a chocolate bar. And the last thing, the E of care, is engaging. So you need language that's so much language is very dense. It uses particularly sort of scientific language, technical language. I see it a lot in economics as well. People use this sort of very abstract type of language that really needs pre-existing expertise. But as soon as you make it in a much more human language, it makes it so much easier for that story, that bit of research, that data point to have impact. So care, clear, accessible, relevant, and engaging.
Well, there you go, everybody. Thanks, Max. That's a great way of. So even if you're not in the chocolate business, you need to somehow come up with something that fits in with care. And you know, Max, it's a really incredible job you're doing. I mean, to be this sort of international, you know, sort of global translator of languages and priorities and everything. Can you run us by one of your successes? You know, what's been something that's been difficult to communicate accurately, something you cared about, and there's been a success. There's been a real measurable success, because nothing motivates people more than success. Can you run us by one?
Okay, I think the best example in biodiversity. So I've got some colleagues, and they do brilliant work bridging biodiversity research with policy, with economics, with boardroom culture, and they create their research. They basically bring together a community of some of the leading minds on these different topics, and they're experts on all sorts of different things. One of them, I think, is man you've worked with, Paul, on Enrique Sala, and essentially what they do is they start with the community. And then they build a load of research based on sort of consultation with that community. And the example I can think of is they came out with a report a few years ago, well, a series of reports called the New Nature Economy Report, and there were several, a few sort of top headlines or top data points that came out of it. One of them was, and I see it constantly sort of quoted in Bloomberg, which is Bloomberg.com, which is the financial news organization. So is read by Wall Street corporates, etc. And it said over half of global GDP is highly dependent on nature. Half of global GDP is highly. I mean, of course, we're all dependent on nature, but putting the sort of numbers around that helps to bridge that really difficult way of sort of, biodiversity is so complicated. It's all about the sort of complicated relationships, and bridging that with sort of Wall Street, where essentially, they're trying to sort of, they sort of think in terms of spreadsheets and sort of profits and losses and all sorts of metrics around financial risk and financial opportunity. So that really, that headline, over half of global GDP highly dependent on nature, really resonated with a lot of people, and I see it quoted and repeated a lot. There were also a couple of other sort of data points that came out of it. I know the Guardian ran a piece on it which said if we shift to a nature positive economy, then that will create 10 trillion in annual economic value, and up to about 400 million jobs. So whilst the report was very real about the sort of really serious problems we're facing, it also gave a story of hope, optimism, and a kind of sense of redemption.
Absolutely brilliant. And this is the kind of thing that you really hope, continues. Because I remember seeing some headlines. We've all remember the IPBES report headline, didn't we? Numbers of species lost.
Yes,
but it didn't seem to bring in action that you've just described. There was all this and lots of horror stories, but it didn't really seem to lead to as much smart decision making as we would have hoped. So what you're describing is absolutely brilliant. That it really is, but it wouldn't have happened without your and your colleagues' work really to communicate it through WEF and your channels. It never would have worked. Absolutely brilliant example that those field data points and all those science work, it really does help. It really does make a difference.
It does.
It's where the numbers come from, and it's where it happens. I remember when you and I were at Davos together a few years ago, I got really excited about something called ESG investing, and there was a sense of energy underneath ESG investing, that there was a hope that we were on this sort of tipping point where it was about to overtake more dare I say it, traditional investing. So it was, sensible, smart, sustainable investing was going to outperform others. And I got very excited at that moment. Is that still the case, Max? What's happening with it?
It's interesting. The Financial Times has they have a festival going on this weekend, and where they're looking at where they're looking at things like ESG investing. I think it's taking place in Washington, and one of the one of the headlines of the sessions is ESG under fire. As fossil fuel companies return to the fore and there are greenwashing scandals, is ESG at risk of becoming outdated and discredited? Now, I don't know. I don't know if ESG is going to go down. Is it going to go up? There's much better financial minds who know that. What I will say is, it is really, when it comes to biodiversity, it is really clear that so many people are in very senior leadership positions are asking questions around biodiversity and trying to find solutions. They're trying to understand it and trying to see where they can shift business models, where they can change corporate policy, where they can change government policy, where they can work with civil society, where they can work with all of these different groups of people, scientists, experts, activists, indigenous communities, and actually shift to a nature positive economy.
I think too, Max. Yeah, thank you. I think too, people, people who necessarily aren't scientists or aren't environmental experts or financial experts, when we buy things or get engaged with things, we're asking much smarter questions than we ever used to. When people go and buy a mortgage, or buy a house or buy pension plans or insurances or cars, big things. People ask lots of questions. We want to interrogate these people's values, don't we? We want to go this way or that way, someone that will make a difference. And when we're at the other end of the financial scale and we're doing our grocery shopping every week, people are really looking at those packets. What's in it? Where is it made? What are the values of the company? And I feel that's a very positive step. What do you think, Max?
I
switched on consumers.
I think it shows. It is and I think it shows how, if you have really effective storytelling, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to tell the whole story. You can just tell a bit of the story. Just one other example of a project I worked on a number of years ago was where we released a report with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is all around the new plastic economy. That was the title of the report, but the headline that we went for was by 2050, and it was based on a data point. It was based on an extrapolation and a data point within the report, which said that by 2050, on current trends, there'd be more plastic than fish in the ocean. So that sort of more plastic than fish was a very sort of kind of resonant meme, and journalists wrote about it. It's been that term has been used in sort of in environment treaties, in the UN Environment Programme and the work that's been done to sort of to bring sort of countries around the world to tackle plastic waste. That key sort of stat, or that little meme, has been used everywhere. And it's also, you can sort of see it in, I think it was used in David Attenborough's Frozen Planet. I think was the, I think it was, I think it came up in one of the David Attenborough documentaries. The point being is that when you have that storytelling, because you were talking about consumers, and people sort of being more responsible consumers, when you have sort of nice, pithy, succinct storytelling, or a sort of meme like that, doesn't have to tell the whole story, but when you have something like that, you're basically you're using this wonderful thing of language to be able to open up solutions to other people. So I would say that you as a someone as a marine researcher, or as a sort of biodiversity researcher, or as a sort of policymaker or sort of financier in Wall Street, when you use good language, you're not just making yourself responsible for finding the solutions. And I imagine a lot of scientists feel that huge pressure because they know so much, and but you're, with clever storytelling, you're opening up solutions to other people, because I think people want to be part of the solutions. Consumers want they want to consume differently. They want to know that they're in some way empowered to make it to make a change.
So for scientists working in the field, and it can be a lonely place working at the front line of science, even if scientists are part of a big team, as you well said, Max, and we both know, don't we, that senior scientists, they have a lot of pressure. That these hypotheses, science ideas can be risky. They're obviously challenging, and they have to work in the field. And it can mean, even if they're with a big team of support, they can feel a bit lonely. So if they don't have Max Hall on the other end of the phone, or standing next to them, knee deep in cold water as they're collecting samples, they have to somehow we have to capture your words and your guidance so that it makes sense when you're back in the tent or back in the cabin on the boat, rolling around, typing up the reports. These people have to remember, as well as the massive report, all of the metadata, they have to remember to also produce something that goes along your care lines. Again, you got to remember those 4 letters, and something that's very easy to get hold of and get the main point. So Max, for people to do that, what do they do? Can you take us through care again?
Okay, so you're going to be clear, accessible, relevant, and engaging. So clear means being short, succinct, pithy. Not the full story, but just enough to grab people's attention. Accessible, be accessible to your audience. That's the A. So don't assume any pre-existing knowledge or expertise, and really avoid jargon. Make it relevant to a person's problem or solution. Make it relevant to people's experience, to your audience's experience. So think these are what are the challenges that your audience is living through, and try to sort of talk to them in those terms. And then use engaging language. Don't talk in sort of abstractions. Talk in terms of people, experiences, things. Then sort of ideas really catch on.
It's great advice, because I wonder how many people in their scientific training get guidance on storytelling. I imagine people learning to, in science studies. So maybe we've got people joining us right now. I mean, there's people all over the world joined us today. And if you're a scientist now, or if you're someone at university studying a science, I wonder how many of you are receiving communication, media training on how to tell important stories to communicate your work, because that storytelling, we have a master with us, Max Hall from WEF at the moment, but that storytelling is as essential ingredient as your science studies and the funding and all the support you're going to get. So I wonder, do you know, Max, do people receive storytelling media training in their science degrees?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know. I mean, there are some great science communicators and storytellers out there, and I think what they do really well is they know they're gonna, in science, they know that they're not going to be able to tell the full story. They're not going to be able to present all of their data. Science and science research, and sort of writing a PhD or writing a thesis, there's a lot of detail in there, and it's about a very, very, very specific thing. So I think a lot of the advice I would give to scientists, to experts, is that you need to meet the audience where they are. This is where your audience is. they're interested in this top line stuff. Your expertise is, you know, really, really deep and thorough. So where these two bits meet is just up here. You just need you don't need to tell that full story. Really prioritize the thing that you think is most interesting and resonant and relevant to people's lives.
Brilliant, what great words for people at the front line trying to get their message out, or indeed if you're in your studies right now wondering how to communicate your valuable work. Thanks a lot, Max. This is a really great start to the Global Biodiversity Festival, because without you joining that silver thread together, you know, where would be the relevance of all the work? So thank you for bringing it to life, Max. And I hope that I see on the chat here, we've got people from all over the world, and great to see you, everybody. And Max, those words are going to be ringing in field scientists' ears as they're trying, well, what do I do with all this? How do I communicate this? Call Max.
There's lots of good storytellers out there. Thanks, Paul.
Brilliant, Max. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a brilliant time.
Thank
See
you. Bye-bye.
See you.